Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling something that is, well, it's one of the most fiercely debated, incredibly complex issues of our entire time: drug legalization. We're going to go on a completely impartial journey together here. I'm talking about zooming all the way out to look at the hard, national-level data and economic policy, and then zooming right back into individual ethical frameworks and personal philosophy. Seriously, whether you've thought about this issue a ton or you're literally just starting to form an opinion today, I promise there is something in here that's going to challenge your perspective. Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for the explainer today. We'll start with the macro-level history in Part 1, the war on drugs, then Part 2, the policy debate, Part 3, the libertarian paradox, and finally Part 4, the ethical perspective.
All right, Section 1, the war on drugs.
So to really grasp the nuances of the modern legalization debate, we absolutely first have to understand the sheer scale of the system we already have in place, what we commonly call the war on drugs. It didn't just happen overnight, right? We can actually trace how this federal effort escalated over the decades. It all started back in 1969. That's when President Richard Nixon implemented the very first comprehensive federal effort to prevent drug abuse. He officially coined the phrase war on drugs, and from there, the infrastructure just sort of exploded. By 1988, President Reagan creates the Office of National Drug Control Policy. And then in 1993, Bill Clinton steps in and elevates the drug czar to a full-blown cabinet-level position. For decades now, this continuous escalation has cost literally tens of millions of federal dollars every single year, purely dedicated to interdiction and education.
So the crucial point is, how do all those policies and all those millions of dollars actually translate into real-world enforcement on the ground? Well, to put it into perspective, in 2015 alone, there were approximately 1.5 million drug arrests in the United States. Just think about the logistical scale of that for a second. 1.5 million arrests in a single year.
And if we break down those 2015 arrests, things get even more interesting. A staggering 40% of them were specifically related to marijuana alone. Just marijuana. With the remaining 60% accounting for literally all other drugs combined.
Now, unsurprisingly, the footprint this leaves on the American prison system is absolutely massive. As of 2016, roughly 450,000 of the 2.2 million total prisoners in the U.S. were drug offenders. That is a massive chunk of the incarcerated population locked into this system, representing immense human and financial costs.
Which brings us to Section 2, the policy debate.
With a system this massive and honestly this expensive, how do experts actually think we should handle it moving forward? Well, this brings us to two heavyweight thinkers who anchor the absolute opposite sides of the legalization debate. On the pro-legalization side, we have the legendary economist Milton Friedman, and over on the anti-legalization side, we have William Bennett. And Bennett actually knows this system from the inside out because he served as one of the very first U.S. drug czars. We're going to look at their arguments completely impartially here, just to really understand the core tension driving this whole policy debate.
So, Friedman approached this whole thing through the lens of pure economics. He outlined several distinct advantages to legalization. First off, he argued it would decrease narcoterrorism. Why? Because the violent black market and the drug lords who run it, they only make those massive profits because the product is illegal. Secondly, he believed legalization removes that psychological forbidden fruit effect, that rebel allure that ironically encourages drug use in the first place. Thirdly, he argued that lower legal prices would actually reduce crime across the board because addicts wouldn't be forced to resort to theft or even murder just to fund their habits. And finally, he pointed out it would save the government billions, yes, billions of dollars in interdiction spending.
Okay, but contrast this with Bennett's counterarguments, because they are forceful. Bennett warned that legalization would actually lead to a massive spike in overall drug abuse. He pointed historically to the repeal of prohibition, noting that alcohol consumption shot up by roughly 350% after it was legalized. He also completely disagreed that the black market would just magically disappear. He argued it would persist because heavy government taxes on legal drugs would instantly create an incentive for a cheaper underground market. Furthermore, he argued that desperate addicts would still resort to crime to feed their habits. And, maybe his biggest point, he said any financial gains from cutting the drug war budget, those would be entirely wiped out by the explosive, catastrophic societal and government costs of treating widespread addiction.
Let's move to Section 3 and see how this builds into the libertarian paradox.
So we're shifting gears here a bit, moving from macroeconomics to a really fascinating philosophical twist presented by Christian ethicist Tim Shaw. And this specifically focuses on the legalization of marijuana. Now, to fully grasp this paradox, we first need a quick definition of libertarianism.
Broadly speaking, it's the political philosophy that the government is only justified in coercing people to prevent harm to third parties. The core goal here is maximizing personal freedom, operating on the firm belief that the government should absolutely not be in the business of protecting people from themselves. Because of this, libertarians almost always champion drug legalization, but Shaw presents this incredible irony. He argues that, based on their very own rules, libertarians should actually support marijuana prohibition.
Let's walk through his logical syllogism step by step to see exactly how he gets there. Step 1. A key responsibility of the state is to protect individual freedom. Right, makes sense. Step 2. In order to effectively exercise that freedom, a person must possess personal agency and rationality. Step 3. Rational thought inherently requires proper cognitive function. And finally, step 4. Marijuana, by its very nature, disrupts cognitive function. Therefore, Shaw concludes the state actually has a responsibility to restrict marijuana because it undermines the exact cognitive foundation required to be a free individual in the first place.
Now, libertarians will often counter this right away by saying, hey, smoking pot is a victimless, self-regarding act. It only affects the user. But Shaw has a highly provocative response to that. He argues that when a person uses marijuana, the intoxicating drug itself acts as a threatening third party. He actually compares the use of these drugs to selling yourself into cognitive slavery. Basically, even if you choose to do it freely, it strips away the very personal autonomy that libertarianism is trying to protect.
Now, you might be wondering right now, wait a second, what about unhealthy foods or alcohol? Shouldn't the government ban those too under this exact same logic? Well, Shaw's defense here is actually quite specific. He notes that, sure, while you might eat a giant, greasy cheeseburger just because it tastes amazing, or maybe you have a glass of wine with dinner as a social lubricant, their primary purpose isn't cognitive impairment. But in stark contrast, the primary intended purpose of marijuana is to get high. It is literally consumed to intentionally impair your cognitive function.
Let's bring this all the way down to the individual. Section 4. The ethical perspective.
We are transitioning now from abstract political philosophy right down to the intimate micro-level perspective. We're going to explore Dr. James S. Spiegel's personal and theological observations on what drug use actually does to the individual. Dr. Spiegel outlines several core ethical concerns, and these are deeply rooted in his own life experience and his Christian theology. He starts with the Apostle Paul's concept that the human body is a sacred temple of the Holy Spirit, meaning unnecessarily polluting it disrespects God. But from there, he identifies several other very real behavioral pitfalls: the problem of sloth, the narcissism that comes from obsessing over your own mental state, the slippery slope of lawlessness, and the very real physical danger of bad company.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Dr. Spiegel addresses that problem of sloth, because students will often point to highly successful, incredibly industrious marijuana users, like Paul McCartney of the Beatles, right? Dr. Spiegel calls this the McCartney counterfactual. While we obviously know McCartney wrote incredible, world-changing music while using drugs, Dr. Spiegel asks us to consider the counterfactual. How much more innovative, how much more creative could McCartney have been if he had been completely sober and operating at absolute peak cognitive function?
He also shares this powerful folk metaphor that he originally learned from his mother. It goes, "You don't miss a slice from a cut loaf of bread." Now, in the context of drug use, the idea is that when you routinely break the law just to buy drugs, it deadens your conscience. He actually candidly shares a story about how his own routine marijuana use as a young man made casually stealing a car's gas cap feel completely trivial at the time. I mean, a gas cap? Really? But actually, scratch that. That's exactly the point. Once the loaf is cut, once you cross that initial threshold of lawbreaking, what's another slice? It's the slippery slope. Finally, this routine lawbreaking brings an immediate, very real physical threat. Dr. Spiegel recounts an anecdote from his past down in Mississippi, where a desperate search for marijuana somehow landed him right in the home of a major regional drug distributor. He said he immediately realized he was in way over his head. And this perfectly highlights how just seeking out drugs can inadvertently drag a user into incredibly dangerous illegal hierarchies. Suddenly, the threat of physical violence is a very real, very immediate reality for you, simply because of the bad company you are keeping.
Wow, okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We've looked at the staggering scale and the real-world statistics of the war on drugs. We explored the fierce economic policy debate between Friedman and Bennett. We unpacked the fascinating libertarian paradox of cognitive slavery. And we closed out with some deeply personal ethical reflections on how drug use alters human character. So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to kind of synthesize everything we've just explored. Where should society draw the line between maximizing personal liberty and preventing personal and societal harm? It's a massive question, definitely without an easy answer. But understanding the perspectives we covered today, that gets us so much closer to having a really informed conversation. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.